From the moment Karen peered over my fence, I knew it wasn't going to be ordinary summer. Her eyes narrowed, scanning my backyard like a drill sergeant inspecting a parade. And then came the words I would remember for months. Your shed isn't in the rulebook. Those 5 words sparked a fire I didn't know existed. You see, this wasn't just any shed. It was a custom-built structure I'd spent weeks designing, carefully selecting the wood, the metal accents, and even the little window shutters that gave it personality. To me, it was a project born out of passion. To Karen, it was a violation of her sacred HOA commandments. I tried diplomacy first. It's within the setback limits, and it matches the color scheme of the house, I explained politely. She shook her head with a perfect mix of condescension and authority. Rulebook says nothing about matching color schemes. That shed needs to go. Every neighbor in our cul-de-sac seemed to sense the tension. There were quiet whispers at the mailbox, furtive glances from passing cars, and the occasional wave that didn't quite reach the eyes. The HOA's power was absolute here, or at least that's what Karen wanted everyone to think. I spent the night reading the HOA's rulebook from cover to cover. Not once did it mention anything about sheds being illegal if they matched the house or if they were built responsibly. In fact, most of the rules were vague, allowing for interpretation, but Karen thrived on interpretation. By sunrise, I had made a decision. If Karen wanted a fight over a simple shed, I'd give her a story she'd never forget. But I wouldn't just fight, I'd make a statement. That's when the idea hit me. Why stop at a shed? Why not build something that not only complied with the letter of the rules, but also sent a message? A message that said, you may control the rulebook, but you don't control creativity. I sketched a rough plan on my garage wall. Sticky notes everywhere, tiny saloons, mini jailhouses, a little bank facade with swinging doors, all elements reminiscent of an old West town. The sun hit the horizon as I stood back, imagining Karen's reaction. She would either faint or have a stroke. Both were equally probable. Little did I know, this decision would ignite a chain reaction that no HOA warning, no threat of fines, and certainly no Karen could ever contain. The next morning, armed with a toolbox, saws, and a stubborn grin, I started construction. My backyard quickly transformed into a construction site that looked more like a Hollywood set than a residential yard. I began with the mini saloon, complete with swinging doors that clattered loudly whenever the wind passed through. Each piece of wood I nailed down felt like a small act of rebellion. Neighbors began peeking over fences, smartphones in hand. Some whispered encouragement, some whispered warnings, but no one dared challenge me, not yet. The sound of hammering echoed through the street, a rhythmic protest to Karen's relentless rulebook enforcement. I added a tiny jailhouse next, complete with a barred window and a sign that read, Outlaw Detention. The humor wasn't lost on me. Each plank I nailed seemed to mock Karen silently, but in a playful, clever way. After all, I wasn't breaking any rules, just bending expectations. The mini bank was trickier. I wanted authenticity. The tiny wooden doors had brass handles, and I carved little dollar signs above them. I even added a miniature hitching post for imaginary horses. By now, word had spread. People were slowing down to see what exactly I was building. Some cars stopped entirely, passengers pointing and laughing. Karen didn't waste time. She stormed over, heels clicking on the pavement, red-faced and shaking her clipboard. This is ridiculous. You're turning your backyard into a carnival, she exclaimed. I waved politely, pretending to be absorbed in my hammering. Ridiculous? I asked, stepping back dramatically to admire a perfectly crooked little roof. It's Wild West architecture, historically accurate for an 1880s town. I explained with mock seriousness, fully aware that this wasn't about accuracy. It was about control and defiance. Karen huffed, flipping through the HOA rulebook, as if sheer volume of paper could magically make my town illegal. I didn't interrupt. I just continued hammering the mini jailhouse roof, each tap echoing like a drumbeat of rebellion. By the afternoon, the town was recognizable. The saloon, the bank, the jailhouse, and even a miniature general store. Each building was meticulously crafted, each corner a subtle jab at HOA rigidity. I stepped back, sweat dripping, heart racing with excitement and fear. This backyard was no longer just a yard. It was a stage, a battleground. Neighbors gathered, whispering excitedly about the Karen showdown. Children pressed their noses against fences, imagining themselves as tiny cowboys and outlaws. Meanwhile, Karen's face darkened from anger to disbelief. It was clear, my shed war had escalated into something far bigger. And yet, I knew the real test was coming. Karen wasn't just going to glare from a distance anymore. She would escalate, and when she did, I needed a plan bigger than a simple mini-town. By the third day, my backyard Wild West town was complete. The sun glinted off tiny saloon windows. The miniature bank doors gleamed, and even the jailhouse bars cast shadows across the freshly raked gravel streets. It was ridiculous, hilarious, and perfect, and it was about to meet its fiercest critic, Karen. She didn't just arrive, she charged, clipboard in hand, determination radiating like heat off asphalt. "I am officially issuing a violation," she shouted. "This entire setup is not in the HOA rulebook. You are breaking multiple guidelines." She waved the rulebook like a sword. I stepped back, hands raised innocently, feigning shock. "Breaking guidelines?" I said, voice dripping with mock horror. "Karen, this is a functional shed, disguised as a historically accurate miniature town." Her eyebrows shot up, disbelief mixed with fury. The neighbors had gathered, creating a semicircle around my backyard. Phones were out, recording every word, every dramatic pause, every clash of personalities. It was turning into a spectacle. Some whispered in awe, others laughed outright. But Karen, oblivious to public opinion, was laser-focused on enforcing her vision of order. She stomped toward the mini jailhouse. "This is completely unacceptable," she screamed. "I want this torn down immediately, or what?" I interrupted, gesturing grandly to the tiny saloon. "You'll call the HOA cavalry? Because I think they might just appreciate the architectural detail." My grin widened. The crowd chuckled, sensing that the power dynamic had shifted. Karen's face turned red, her voice escalating. "You can't just—" "I can," I said simply, "because nothing in the rulebook explicitly forbids it. You may control the interpretation, Karen, but you don't control the rules themselves. And more importantly, you don't control creativity." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish, searching for words. And in that moment of hesitation, the neighbors leaned in. Some clapped subtly, some nodded. The once quiet cul-de-sac was alive with tension, anticipation, and a subtle rebellion that no HOA notice could extinguish. By the end of the confrontation, Karen stormed off, muttering threats and clutching her clipboard like a shield. She had not won. She had not defeated the shed, or rather the town. The Wild West structures stood proudly, tiny signs swaying in the breeze as if waving victory flags. I stood in the middle of my creation, surveying the scene. It was more than a backyard project now. It was a symbol that rules are only as powerful as those willing to challenge them creatively. And Karen's fury, now legendary among neighbors, had become part of the story. But little did I know, this was only the beginning. The town had captured attention far beyond the cul-de-sac, and the next chapter would test my creativity, patience, and courage in ways I could never have imagined. The morning after Karen's storming exit, the cul-de-sac was buzzing. Word of the backyard Wild West town had spread like wildfire. Neighbors peeked over fences. Children ran to see the tiny saloon doors swing in the breeze. And even the HOA secretary stopped by, curiosity overpowering protocol. My creation had become more than a backyard project. It was now a spectacle. Karen, however, had not given up. She returned with a printed, formal complaint, waving it like a white flag of authority. But by now, the crowd had gathered, subtly siding with me, cameras in hand, documenting every step. Karen's aura of control was faltering. Her rulebook had teeth, but it wasn't enough to bite through creativity. I welcomed her with an exaggerated bow. "Good morning, Karen. Care for a drink at the saloon?" I gestured toward the tiny wooden doors. The crowd chuckled. Even the grumpiest neighbor smirked. Karen glared, but for the first time she hesitated. Public opinion was no longer invisible. It was in my backyard, front row and center. The HOA had to intervene, and after reviewing the rules, they admitted defeat. No clause explicitly prohibited a shed disguised as historical architecture. Karen was forced to accept it, grudgingly. Of course, but the rest of the neighborhood celebrated. Tiny Wild West structures now stood as monuments to creativity and subtle rebellion. I spent the next few days adding finishing touches. A mini sheriff's badge above the jailhouse, a little cactus by the bank, and a swinging wanted poster featuring Karen's face, cartoonishly drawn, of course, to keep it lighthearted. Every detail was a gentle reminder. Rules are guidelines, but imagination is limitless. Soon, the town became a neighborhood attraction. Children played outlaws and sheriffs, neighbors stopped by to take photos, and even the local paper ran a small feature. It was surreal. What started as a simple shed dispute had turned into a community story, a shared laugh, and a subtle challenge to rigid control. Karen, though still furious behind closed doors, could no longer dictate the narrative. My backyard wasn't just a yard, it was a legend in miniature. It proved that standing your ground, thinking creatively, and adding a little humor can turn conflict into something unforgettable. As I sipped lemonade on the porch, watching the wind sway the tiny saloon sign, I realized something important. Rules may exist, but stories, imagination, and a little courage leave a far bigger mark. Karen may have tried to stop me, but in the end, the town won, not just in wood and nails, but in spirit. And so, my backyard became a monument to defiance, creativity, and the joy of turning an annoying rule into a Wild West legend. If you enjoyed this story, hit like, drop your reaction in the comments, and subscribe so you don't miss the next crazy HOA showdown.